had finally made it, I thought. After decades of sacrifice, the papers for my dream were signed. Perched on the oceanfront was a $2 million villa, with nothing but the sound of waves to keep me company. Silence, peace, and space to breathe were all I wanted. But my phone rang, and the voice on the other end shattered everything. It was my sister, Melissa. A greeting wasn't even offered. "We're on our way to you. There will be 15 of us," she said. "Beds, towels, slippers, food, prepare everything. We'll be staying for 3 weeks. We'll be there in 40 minutes, so hurry up." In disbelief, I stared at the phone. 15 people. 3 weeks. My sanctuary, my lifelong reward, was about to become her personal resort. My heart raced, but instead of panic, a strange calm spread through me. I smiled. I had a plan. After Melissa hung up, I stood frozen in the middle of my half-unpacked living room. The phone still pressed against my ear even though the line had gone dead. Outside my window, the Pacific stretched endlessly, waves rolling in a steady rhythm, but all I could hear was the echo of her command. "Prepare beds, towels, slippers, food. 15 of us, 3 weeks." My hands shook as I set the phone down on the granite counter. For years, I had dreamed of this exact view. The endless horizon, the salty air rushing through wide-open windows, the faint cries of seagulls over the cliffs. I'd worked double shifts as an engineer, skipped vacations, lived frugally while others splurged, all for this moment. This house wasn't just property. It was my sanctuary. And Melissa, my own sister, had decided it was hers too. I remembered the tone in her voice. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a suggestion. It was a demand, delivered with the certainty of someone who had gotten her way too many times before. Growing up, Melissa had always been the one who snapped her fingers. And I was the one who cleaned up the mess. When she wanted my new clothes, she borrowed them and never returned them. When she needed help with rent in her 20s, I wrote the checks, convincing myself it was just for now. And when she couldn't afford her son's tuition, I dipped into my savings again, telling myself, family comes first. But now she wanted my home. The irony made me laugh, though my chest tightened. I had just moved in a week ago. Cardboard boxes still cluttered the hallway. Art pieces leaned against the wall, waiting to be hung. My bed frame hadn't even been assembled yet. I was still sleeping on a mattress on the floor. And Melissa thought she and her friends, 15 strangers to me, could just waltz in and set up camp for 3 weeks. I closed my eyes, remembering her exact words. "We'll be there in 40 minutes, so hurry up." Not a question, not a courtesy, just an order. She didn't even pause to ask if I was available, if I was comfortable, if I was willing. She assumed that because I had more than she did, I owed her everything. And maybe in the past, I would have caved. Maybe the old me, the one who hated confrontation, the one who believed keeping peace was more important than speaking truth, would have scrambled to make beds, to stock the fridge, to make Melissa happy. But as I stood in that villa, my villa, with the ocean air cooling my flushed skin, something shifted. I wasn't the same Dorothy she'd bossed around as a teenager. I wasn't the same woman who had quietly covered her debts or smiled through her insults at family dinners. No, this was my line in the sand. My eyes landed on a crystal wine glass I had unpacked earlier. The sunlight struck it, scattering tiny rainbows across the marble countertop. Fragile, beautiful, but resilient if held the right way. I picked it up and whispered to myself, this time, things will be different. Because Melissa thought she could barge into my villa. She thought she could take over my life the way she always had. But she had no idea what I had planned for her. The sound of the ocean faded as my mind pulled me backward into years I had tried to bury. Melissa had always been the kind of person who took without asking. And if you dared to say no, she'd make you feel guilty until you gave in anyway. I remembered the first time she called me for help. I was 23, fresh out of college, barely making ends meet with my entry-level job. She wanted money for rent. Just a couple hundred, Becky, she'd pleaded, using that sugary voice that made her sound almost innocent. I'll pay you back the moment I get my next paycheck. I gave it to her, of course. She never repaid me. Years rolled on, and the numbers grew larger. When her credit cards maxed out, she called me. When her car broke down, she called me. When her son needed new clothes, she called me. And every time the story was the same. She was desperate. She promised repayment, and she always failed to deliver. The biggest blow came when her daughter went off to college. I had been saving for my dream home, watching every dollar like a hawk. Melissa, on the other hand, had spent lavishly, designer handbags, spa weekends, vacations with friends. Then suddenly, when tuition was due, she turned to me. "Becky, you've always been the responsible one. You have money. Can't you help just this once? Just this once?" How many times had I heard those words? Too many. But I paid. I paid because I didn't want my niece to suffer for her mother's recklessness. And then there was the wedding. Melissa wanted the grandest event possible. Flowers flown in, a ballroom dripping in gold and crystal, a gown that cost more than my car. Of course, she didn't have the money for it. "Please, Becky," she whispered to me over coffee one afternoon, her hands clutching mine dramatically. "You're the only one I can count on. This day means everything to me." I signed the check. I told myself it was love, that family was worth the sacrifice. But deep down, a voice inside me whispered the truth. Melissa didn't value me. She valued what I could give her. Now, standing in my villa, I could see the pattern clearly. It wasn't love. It wasn't sisterhood. It was entitlement. Decades of it, layered like bricks on my shoulders. Melissa had always assumed I'd be there to catch her when she fell, and I had. But now she wanted to turn my lifelong dream into her playground. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This villa was supposed to be my fresh start, a reward for every sleepless night, every overtime hour, every holiday I'd spent at the office instead of at home. Yet in Melissa's mind, my sacrifices meant nothing more than free vacations for her and her freeloading entourage. I walked to the mantelpiece where I had placed a single framed photograph. Our parents, long gone, smiling on the porch of our childhood home. My chest ached. They had raised us with the same lessons. Work hard. Be kind. Respect what belongs to others. Somehow Melissa had chosen to forget all of that. I touched the frame and whispered, "You'd be ashamed of her if you knew. And maybe, just maybe, you'd be proud of me for what I was about to do." Because this time Melissa wasn't going to get what she wanted. 40 minutes felt like 4 seconds. I hadn't even finished unpacking the box of dishes in my kitchen when the rumble of engines echoed up the coastal road. I stepped to the window, and my stomach dropped. 5 cars, a convoy, Melissa's black SUV at the front like a general leading her troops, followed by sedans stuffed with people, a pickup truck piled high with coolers and beach chairs. Dust rose from the driveway as they pulled in, tires crunching over the stones like an army advancing into conquered territory. I tightened my grip on the counter, the cool granite grounding me. My villa, the home I had saved for, dreamed of, cried over, was about to be stormed. Car doors slammed in rapid succession. Laughter erupted. Children shrieked. Someone yelled, "Wow, this place is insane." And then I saw her, Melissa, emerging from the SUV with oversized sunglasses, her hair whipping in the breeze like she was about to film a commercial. "Becky," she called, spreading her arms wide as though this were some joyful reunion. "Look at this paradise. Zu lucky, lucky girl." I didn't move. My front door stood between us, solid oak with frosted glass panels. I thought for a fleeting second about leaving it locked, pretending not to be home. But the pounding on the door came before I could even decide. "Come on, sis. Open up." We drove 4 hours to get here. I opened the door an inch, just enough to meet her smug smile. "Melissa, I told you I'm not ready for guests." She didn't even hesitate. She shoved the door wider and brushed past me into the foyer, her perfume filling the air. Behind her, a flood of bodies poured in. Faces I didn't recognize, dragging suitcases, lugging boxes of snacks and beer, shouting to one another like this was some frat house weekend. "Check out that pool," someone shouted from the hallway. "This kitchen is massive," another voice echoed. A young woman I'd never met slipped off her sandals and padded across my imported marble, leaving damp footprints from the beach. "Stop," I said, my voice trembling more with fury than fear. "You can't just walk in like this." But they didn't even hear me. Or worse, they didn't care. Melissa twirled in the center of the foyer, spreading her arms wide. "Isn't this perfect, everyone?" Just like I told you, my sister always knew how to live large. My sister, she said it like a title that granted her automatic ownership. Like being related to me was a lifetime pass to every dream I had ever worked for. I followed her gaze as she pointed toward the staircase. The master bedroom's upstairs, right? I'll take that one. It has the best view. My heart lurched. No, I said sharply, stepping into her path. That's my private space. Her sunglasses slid down her nose, revealing the icy glint in her eyes. Becky, don't be selfish. We're family, and besides, you've got plenty of space. Behind her, more voices cheered, dragging their belongings deeper into my home, rearranging my furniture like they owned the place. A man popped open a cooler, the crack of a beer can filling my pristine living room. In less than 10 minutes, my villa, the sanctuary I had dreamed of, was no longer mine. It was theirs. And Melissa, my sister, stood at the center of it all, smiling as if she had won. I stood frozen at the base of the staircase, watching Melissa march upward like a queen ascending her throne. Her heels clicked against the polished wood, echoing through the villa like a countdown to war. Melissa, I snapped, following her. That room is off limits. It's mine. She tossed her head back, her laugh sharp and dismissive. Oh, Becky, don't be ridiculous. It's just a room. And everyone knows the host gives up the best space for her guests. Guests? I hissed. You're not guests. You invited yourself and 15 people I've never even met. She didn't answer. Instead, she threw the double doors of my master bedroom open wide. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the balcony overlooking the Pacific. My sanctuary, my dream. She stepped inside as though it had always belonged to her. 2 women I didn't recognize followed, dragging rolling suitcases across the hardwood. This is perfect for us, one squealed. The light in here will be amazing for selfies. No, I said, my voice trembling as I blocked the doorway. Nobody sleeps in here. This is my private space. Melissa turned slowly, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Becky, stop being dramatic. You have 4 other bedrooms. This one suits me best. Besides, she glanced toward the balcony. I'll need the view for my morning yoga videos. My followers will love it. The casual entitlement in her tone made my stomach twist. I stepped forward, planting myself between her and the balcony. Get out. Her friends exchanged amused looks as if this was some sort of performance. Melissa smirked. Really, Becky? After everything I've done for you? That line almost made me laugh. Everything she'd done for me? For years, I had been the one bailing her out, saving her from eviction, covering her mistakes. But in Melissa's warped version of reality, I was the selfish one. You don't get it, I said, my voice rising. This house isn't a vacation rental. It's not a free resort. It's mine. I bought it. I earned it, and you don't get to take it over for a moment. Silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of waves outside. Then Melissa's smirk hardened. She stepped closer, invading my space, her perfume sharp in my nose. You think this place makes you better than me? She sneered. You think money changes who's in charge here? I'm your sister, Becky. Family always comes first. Not like this, I shot back, my hands shaking, but my voice steady. Not by force. Her eyes narrowed, and in that instant, I saw the truth. She had never come here for a visit. She had come to claim what wasn't hers, the way she always had. Only now the stakes were higher. Behind me, her friends had already flung open my closet doors, fingering my clothes, making comments about borrowing dresses. My blood boiled. Out! I shouted, louder than I'd ever spoken to Melissa in my life. All of you, out! Melissa froze, stunned by the force of my voice. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But just as quickly, she masked it with a cold smile. You're making a big mistake, sis, she said softly. One you'll regret. And with that, she tossed her suitcase onto my bed. The final insult. For a moment, I just stared at the suitcase sprawled across my bedspread, its metal zipper glinting in the sun. Something inside me cracked. Years of biting my tongue, of giving in for the sake of family harmony, of letting Melissa trample over every boundary I had ever set. All of it boiled up at once. Take it off my bed. My voice came out low, dangerous, trembling with fury. Melissa blinked, taken aback by my tone. Then her lips curled into a smirk. Oh, Becky, relax. You've got to learn to share. Family helps family, remember? Isn't that what Mom always said? Her words stabbed like knives. She knew exactly which strings to pull, always dragging our parents' memory into her manipulations. I said no. That single word rang through the room like a gunshot. The chatter behind us died down. For the first time, her friends stopped rummaging and looked at me as though realizing this wasn't a joke. Melissa tilted her head, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Don't be selfish. Everyone here agrees, right? A chorus followed, voices I didn't even recognize. She's got plenty of space. Why make such a fuss over one room? Come on, Becky. Don't ruin the vibe. One of the men cracked open a beer right there in my bedroom, foam spilling onto my hardwood floor. He raised the can toward Melissa. To family. My jaw tightened so hard I thought my teeth might break. Family doesn't invade, I snapped, turning on them. Family doesn't demand, and family sure as hell doesn't treat someone's home like a hotel. Melissa's smirk faltered. You're being dramatic, she muttered, her confidence wavering for a split second. But then she stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. What are you going to do, Becky? Throw us all out? You don't have the guts. Her words were gasoline on a fire I'd been holding back for years. I felt my hands tremble, not from fear, but from the rage of decades finally finding its voice. Yes, I said louder this time so the whole room heard. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Gasps rippled through the group. Melissa's eyes widened, then narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I took a step forward, squaring my shoulders, my pulse pounding in my ears. Watch me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking back. I wasn't the quiet younger sister cleaning up the mess. I was the homeowner, the woman who had built a life through sweat and sacrifice. And this was my line in the sand. Melissa scoffed, but there was a flicker of unease in her expression. You'll regret this, sis. Everyone will see what kind of person you really are. Good, I shot back. Because I'm done letting you define me. This house is mine, and you're not welcome here. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the muffled crash of waves outside. For once, Melissa had no snappy comeback. And for once, I didn't back down. The room felt like it was closing in on me. 15 people in my house, voices rising, laughter echoing in my sanctuary as if I were invisible. My pulse thudded in my ears. I had tried reason. I had tried standing firm, but Melissa wasn't listening. She never had. I took a slow breath, forcing my shaking hands to stay steady. Then I turned and walked out of the master bedroom. Behind me, I heard scoffs, mocking laughter. Melissa's voice dripping with disdain. She's bluffing. She won't do anything. But she was wrong. I strode down the hall into my study and shut the heavy oak door with a sharp click. The lock turned under my fingers, and for the first time since they arrived, I felt the faintest sense of control. I leaned against the desk, breathing hard, staring at the phone in my hand. My thumb hovered over the screen. Could I really do this? Call the police on my own sister? On people who were technically family? A crash from the living room made my decision for me. The sound of glass shattering, followed by laughter, rolled through the house. My sanctuary was under siege. I dialed 911. What's your emergency? My voice trembled, but it carried a strength I hadn't heard in myself before. There are people in my home who refuse to leave, about 15 of them. They force their way in. I need help. The operator's tone was calm, professional. Ma'am, are you in immediate physical danger? Not yet, I whispered, glancing at the door as shadows passed under the crack. But they won't leave. I told them multiple times. They're ignoring me. Can you confirm this is your residence? Yes, I said firmly. I purchased the property last month. I have the deed here. My name is Dorothy Collins. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Stay in a secure room until they arrive. Estimated arrival time is 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I could survive that. A loud knock rattled the study door. "Becky." Melissa's voice sang out, falsely cheerful. "Come on, don't be like this. We're family. Let's talk like adults." Another voice, male and mocking, chimed in. "She's calling the cops, isn't she? Total drama queen." My stomach twisted, but I stayed silent. Then Melissa's tone shifted, sharp as broken glass. "If you do this, Becky, you'll regret it. You'll lose me. You'll lose all of us. And you'll be alone in this big empty house." Her words pressed on old wounds. The fear of loneliness that had haunted me for years. But instead of breaking me, they hardened me. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, our parents smiling, a reminder of values Melissa had long abandoned. I gripped the phone tighter and whispered to myself, "Better alone than exploited." Outside the door, the voices grew frantic. They knew the police were coming. I could hear Melissa hissing to her friends, panic slipping into her tone. "Don't worry, she won't go through with it. She never does." But this time she was wrong. The minutes dragged like hours. My eyes flicked constantly to the clock on my desk, each second stretching longer than the last. Outside my study door, the whispers had turned into arguments. Some of Melissa's friends wanted to leave. Others insisted on waiting me out. Melissa's voice, sharp and domineering, cut through them all. "She won't do it. She's just being dramatic. Give her a few minutes. She'll open the door and apologize." Then finally, the sound I'd been waiting for. Sirens, faint at first, then louder, cutting through the ocean breeze like a blade. My heart leapt into my throat. Relief surged through me, tempered with a flicker of dread because I knew the confrontation wasn't over. Heavy pounding shook the front door. This time it wasn't Melissa or her entourage. This knock carried authority. "Police, open up." The house erupted into chaos. Footsteps scrambled across my marble floors, voices overlapping in panic. I unlocked my study door and stepped into the hallway, my phone still clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Melissa was at the foyer, plastering on her sweetest smile as she pulled the door open. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she cooed, her tone dripping with false innocence. "My sister's having a bit of an episode. We were just trying to spend some time together, and she—" "Ma'am," the officer's voice cut her off, firm and unimpressed. Two of them stepped inside. A tall man with graying temples and a younger woman with sharp, watchful eyes. "Are you the homeowner who made the call?" I stepped forward, my knees trembling, but my voice steady. "Yes. Dorothy Collins. This is my property." They entered without permission and refused to leave when I asked. The older officer nodded. "Do you have proof of ownership?" I opened the folder I'd prepared and handed over the deed. My fingers no longer shook. They felt steady for the first time all day. Melissa laughed lightly, trying to wave it off. "This is a family matter, officers. She's just overreacting. We drove hours to get here, and she invited us." "I never invited you," I snapped, my voice ringing louder than I expected. "You demanded. You barged in. You've destroyed my home." The younger officer scanned the room. Her eyes lingered on the half-empty beer cans, the piles of luggage, the muddy footprints streaking across my pristine floor. Her jaw tightened. "Sir," the older officer said to me, "do you want these individuals removed from your property?" "Yes," I said clearly, my voice unwavering. "Every single one of them." Gasps rippled through the group. Melissa's smile faltered. "Becky, don't do this," she hissed. "Think about what you're saying. We're family. Family doesn't force their way into someone's home," I said coldly. The officer turned back to Melissa and her crowd. "You have 15 minutes to gather your belongings and vacate. If you're still here after that, you'll be arrested for trespassing." The room exploded with protests. Some of Melissa's friends cursed under their breath as they started stuffing clothes back into suitcases. Others shot me dirty looks as though I were the villain. Melissa herself stood frozen, her fists clenched, her face a mask of fury barely concealed beneath a trembling smile. "You'll regret this," she whispered, leaning close as she dragged her suitcase toward the door. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I felt taller than her, stronger, untouchable. As the last of them shuffled out under the officer's watchful eyes, Silence began to creep back into my villa. My villa. And for the first time since that phone call, I allowed myself to breathe. When the door finally closed behind them, the silence was deafening. No more laughter bouncing off the walls. No more clinking beer cans or careless footsteps smearing dirt across my floors. Just the steady rhythm of waves outside, and the faint hum of the air conditioner. I leaned against the foyer wall, exhaling so deeply it felt like the first real breath I'd taken all day. My hands were still trembling, not from fear this time, but from release. The police had done their job. Melissa and her entourage were gone. I walked through the villa slowly, almost like an investigator surveying a crime scene. Beer bottles on the counter, towels abandoned on the floor, fingerprints smudging the glass doors to the balcony. In my bedroom, my bedspread was wrinkled from the suitcase Melissa had so boldly thrown there. A pair of shoes I didn't recognize sat carelessly by the window. I picked them up and tossed them outside. As I straightened the blankets on my bed, I caught sight of the ocean through the balcony doors. The sun was dipping lower, painting the water in shades of orange and pink. For a moment, I just stood there, my chest rising and falling with something between exhaustion and relief. They were gone. Melissa's voice still echoed in my head though. "You'll regret this. You'll lose us. You'll be alone in this big empty house." The words twisted in my chest, pressing on old wounds. But then another thought followed, clear and steady. I'd rather be alone than used. I poured myself a glass of wine and carried it to the balcony. The salty breeze brushed my skin, cool and soothing. I sank into a chair, finally letting the weight slip from my shoulders. For years, I had been the sister who said yes, the one who sacrificed, the one who swallowed anger for the sake of peace. Today, for the first time, I had said no, and I hadn't crumbled. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Dozens of missed calls and texts from Melissa lit up the screen. I didn't bother opening them. Instead, I turned the phone over, face down. Tonight wasn't about her. Tonight was about me. I raised my glass toward the ocean, the horizon glowing gold, as if the universe itself was toasting with me. To peace, I thought, to freedom, to finally drawing the line. Being the youngest in the Morrison family meant that I was always treated like the family afterthought. My brother Jake received praise for every minor achievement, while I was consistently dismissed as the quiet one who would never amount to much. My parents had a particular talent for making me feel invisible, especially when it came to anything important. This pattern started early. For Jake's high school graduation with C's, they threw him a party. When I graduated valedictorian 3 years later, they simply said congratulations before moving on to discuss Jake's latest job prospects. When Jake got his first apartment, they helped him move and bought him furniture. When I bought my first house at 25, their reaction was to say it was probably too much responsibility for someone my age. That house became my sanctuary. It was a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing flashy, but it was mine. Every penny for the down payment came from my government job, saved by working extra shifts and living frugally. The day I got the keys, I called to share the news. "You bought a house?" Mom had sounded skeptical. "Are you sure you can afford the payments?" "It's a good investment," I'd replied, trying to keep the excitement in my voice. "Investment?" Jake had laughed in the background. "She can barely afford car insurance. This is going to end badly." Dad had taken the phone. "Honey, maybe you should have talked to us first. Houses are a big responsibility. What if something breaks? What if you lose your job?" I'd hung up, feeling completely deflated. Even my biggest achievement was treated like a mistake waiting to happen. For the next few years, that house became a source of ongoing commentary from my family. Every gathering included some reference to my expensive mistake, or questions about whether I was keeping up with the payments. Jake particularly enjoyed making jokes about my mortgage chains and how I was tied down to a depreciating asset. "Smart people rent," he'd announce at family dinners. "Flexibility is everything. Sarah's stuck with that house whether she likes it or not." The comments stung, but I learned not to react. I would just smile and change the subject. Meanwhile, Jake bounced between jobs and apartments, always asking our parents for money to cover rent or security deposits. Somehow, his financial instability was seen as exploring options, while my stable homeownership was viewed as limiting myself. The real trouble started last summer when I accepted a temporary assignment overseas. My government position required 6 months in Eastern Europe working on what I could only describe to my family as administrative oversight. The details were classified, but the work was important and the pay was excellent. Before leaving, I arranged everything for the house. I set up automatic payments for utilities, arranged for lawn care, and installed a comprehensive security system. I also gave my parents a spare key and emergency contact information, purely for genuine emergencies like burst pipes or break-ins. Just in case something catastrophic happens, I'd explain during the handover. Otherwise, the house should take care of itself. Jake had rolled his eyes. Look at her preparing for her little house, like it's a historic landmark. It's just a basic suburban house, Sarah. A basic house she can't really afford, Mom had added with a sigh. I'd bitten my tongue and finished the security briefing. Before my flight, I reminded them one last time that the key was for emergencies only. The work overseas was intense and consuming. I was deep in financial investigations, tracking complex networks across multiple countries. The days were long and communication with home was limited due to security protocols. I managed to check in a few times, brief conversations where everyone assured me everything was fine. House is still standing, Jake had joked during one call. No disasters yet. I relaxed, focusing on my work. The investigation was reaching a critical phase, coordinating with international law enforcement on high-priority cases. My expertise in financial crimes had made me essential to the team. The assignment was supposed to end in March, but complications arose that required my expertise for an additional month. I sent a message to my family explaining the extension, and everyone seemed fine. Take all the time you need, Dad had written back. We're managing everything here. What I didn't know was that Jake had been watching my house for months, noticing that I never returned, never visited, never seemed to check on it. In his mind, this confirmed what he'd always believed. I was in over my head, probably struggling and too proud to admit I needed help. The first sign of trouble came through my secure communication channel. My supervisor pulled me aside during my final week. We've got an unusual situation, Agent Martinez, he said, holding a classified report. There's been some activity at your registered address. Nothing threatening, but it's flagged. Property transaction. Someone filed paperwork claiming ownership transfer. I stared, not understanding. That's impossible. I own that house. There's no transaction. That's why it's flagged as suspicious. Real estate fraud is sometimes used to compromise federal employees. We're treating this as a potential security threat. The flight home was a nightmare. I couldn't contact my family due to operational security, and I couldn't get details. All I knew was that someone had filed paperwork claiming they'd purchased my property, and federal investigators were now involved. I landed on a Tuesday morning and drove straight home. The house looked normal, but there was a lockbox on the front door and a sold sign on the lawn. My key didn't work. My hands shaking, I called the number on the sign. Morrison Property Services, a cheerful voice answered. This is Sarah Morrison. Someone put a sold sign on my house. I need to know what's happening. A pause. Oh, you must be the sister. Jake told us you might call. He explained you'd been struggling with the payments and finally agreed to let him handle the sale. Congratulations on getting out from under that mortgage. My stomach dropped. Jake Morrison is my brother. He doesn't own this house. Ido. Ma'am, Jake Morrison presented power of attorney documents and a deed showing his ownership. He said you'd been overseas and unable to handle the transaction yourself. The sale closed last week. I hung up and called my parents' house immediately. Sarah. Mom sounded genuinely happy. You're back. How was your trip? Where's Jake? I need to talk to him right now. He's here. We're actually having a little celebration dinner. Jake made such a smart business decision. We're so proud of him. Put him on the phone. Now. Jake's voice came through, cocky and amused. Hey sis, welcome back to reality. What did you do to my house? I solved your problem. You were clearly in over your head, gone for months, probably behind on payments. I found a buyer, handled the paperwork, and got you out of that financial mess. You should be thanking me. That wasn't your house to sell. Sarah, honey. Dad's voice cut in on speakerphone. Jake showed us all the financial documents. You were 3 months behind. The bank was starting foreclosure. Jake saved your credit rating. I felt like I was losing my mind. That's impossible. All my payments are automatic. I haven't missed a single payment in 3 years. The bank records don't lie, Jake said smugly. Look, I know this is embarrassing, but I handled it quietly. The buyer was willing to take over the debt and pay you a small amount to walk away. You actually made $15,000 after all the fees. Where's my $15,000? I deposited it in your account, minus the money you owed me for handling everything. But that's not the point. The point is you're free now. No more house payments you couldn't afford. I was hyperventilating. Jake, listen very carefully. I never missed a payment. I never gave you permission to sell my house. I never signed any power of attorney. Sarah, we have your signature on all the documents, Mom interjected gently. Maybe the stress of that job overseas affected your memory. That's when I realized what had happened. Jake had forged my signature, using documents he'd seen over the years. He'd convinced a real estate agent and a title company he had the right to sell, and my family believed his story. But what Jake didn't know was that my house wasn't just any property. Due to my security clearance, it was registered with federal authorities and monitored as part of national security protocols. Any unauthorized transaction would trigger an immediate investigation. I need to come over, I said quietly. We need to discuss this in person. Of course, Dad said warmly. Come celebrate with us. Jake's already talking about investing your portion in his new business venture. I drove to my childhood home in a daze. The living room was decorated like a party with a "Congratulations, Jake" banner. My brother was holding court in Dad's recliner, telling the story of how he'd rescued me. And the best part, Jake was saying as I walked in, is that she doesn't have to worry about property taxes or maintenance anymore. I basically gave her back her freedom. There she is. Mom hugged me tightly. We're so proud of Jake for looking out for you. I looked at their happy faces. They genuinely believed Jake had done something wonderful. In their minds, I was the irresponsible little sister, and Jake was the hero. Tell me exactly what happened, I said, sitting down across from Jake. It's pretty simple, Jake began, enjoying the attention. I noticed you never came back. Neighbors hadn't seen you. The lawn was overgrown despite the service. Mail was piling up. The place looked abandoned. So I did some digging. He continued proudly. I called the mortgage company, pretending to be worried about my sister. They confirmed you were behind. 3 months, Sarah. So I went to the bank, explained the situation. They said foreclosure had started. That's when I knew I had to step in. How did you get the legal right to sell? I asked carefully. Jake pulled out a folder. Power of attorney. Lucky thing you signed this before you left. He handed me a document with my signature. It looked perfect. Too perfect. I don't remember signing this, I said quietly. You signed it the day before you left, Jake said confidently. You said it was for emergencies. Don't you remember? You were really stressed. The room nodded sympathetically. The buyer was great, Jake continued. A nice young couple, first-time homeowners. Pre-approved, willing to close quickly. Honestly, Sarah, you should see how happy they are. They're planning to start a family in your old house. And you handled all the paperwork? Everything. Title transfer, mortgage payoff. Found the buyers myself. Saved you thousands in commission. Jake was beaming. Sold your little house for $300,000, he announced dramatically. The family burst into applause. Finally making smart decisions. Mom cheered. I said nothing, my mind racing. Jake thought he'd sold a simple house, but he'd illegally transferred federal property. My phone buzzed with a secure message. Agent Martinez. Need immediate debrief. Federal crime reported at your address. Are you secure? I typed back, secure. Family gathering. We'll call within hour. Everything okay? Dad asked, noticing my phone. Just work, I said calmly. Jake, Can you tell me the buyers' names? I want to send them a welcome card. David and Michelle Parker. Sweet couple, mid-20s. So excited about their first house. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Hello, is this Sarah Morrison? A panicked voice asked, almost screaming. Yes, who is this? This is James Wheeler from Wheeler & Associates law firm. We represented the Parker family. Why are FBI agents at our office? They have a warrant for all documents related to the sale. They're saying the transaction was fraudulent and involves national security violations. I could hear the celebration in the living room. Mr. Wheeler, listen carefully. I never authorized the sale. My brother forged my signature and illegally transferred federal property. What? But he had power of attorney. He had your signature. Those documents are forged. The signature is fake. And Mr. Wheeler, my property is registered with federal authorities due to my security clearance. Any unauthorized transaction triggers an automatic investigation. Silence. Then frantic rustling. Oh God, Wheeler whispered. The FBI is asking about wire fraud, identity theft, federal property statutes. They want to know if we verified the documents. Did you? We accepted them in good faith. Your brother seemed legitimate. I could hear shouting in his office. Mr. Wheeler, are the Parkers there now? Yes. They're here trying to understand why federal agents are confiscating their closing documents. Tell them I'm very sorry, but they were victims of fraud. The sale was illegal. They need to cooperate fully. The FBI will handle financial recovery. But they spent their life savings. They've already moved in. The FBI will handle it. Everyone needs to cooperate with federal investigators. I hung up. I walked back to the living room. Who was that? Mom asked. The buyer's lawyer, I said calmly. Jake perked up. Everything okay? No problems, I hope. I sat down. Jake, I need you to understand something important. My house wasn't just any property. Due to my job, it's registered with federal authorities. Any unauthorized transaction triggers an automatic investigation. Jake laughed. Come on, Sarah. It's just a regular house. Don't be so dramatic. The FBI is currently confiscating all documents, I said quietly. They're treating this as wire fraud, identity theft, and illegal transfer of federal property. The room went silent. That's ridiculous, Dad said. Jake was helping you. There was no bad situation. I never missed a payment. I never signed a power of attorney. I never gave anyone permission to sell my house. Jake's confidence cracked. But the bank confirmed you were behind. Jake, did you actually speak to my mortgage company, or did you call a different number? His face went pale. I called the number I found online. What name did you give them? I said I was Jake Morrison, your brother, concerned about your property. They gave you detailed financial information over the phone based on just sharing my last name? The room grew uncomfortable. The signature on the power of attorney, I continued. Can you tell me when and where I supposedly signed it? The day before you left. In your kitchen. Jake, I left directly from my office. I never went home that day. I never signed any legal documents. My phone rang. Agent Martinez. Excuse me, I said, stepping onto the back porch. This is Sarah Morrison. Agent Morrison, we need you to come in immediately. We've got a federal crime scene at your property. We need your full debrief on the security implications. My brother is here with my family. He believes he was helping me. Your brother committed wire fraud, identity theft, and illegal transfer of federal property. The buyers are victims. The professionals are potential accomplices. Your property is evidence. We're executing arrest warrants within the hour. Can you keep him at your location? He doesn't know he's committed a crime. He thinks he was helping me. Agent Morrison, his intentions are irrelevant to the charges. I hung up and walked back inside. The mood had shifted. Jake was frantically looking through his folder. My parents were asking questions he couldn't answer. Sarah, Mom said. Jake says the mortgage company told him you were behind, but he can't remember who he spoke to. And the power of attorney, Dad added. Jake says you signed it in your kitchen, But you said you left from your office. Jake was sweating. Look, maybe I'm remembering some details wrong, but the important thing is I helped Sarah get out of a bad situation. What bad situation? I asked gently. My payments were automatic and current. I never asked for help. I never signed any documents. But the foreclosure notices. Jake started, then stopped. What foreclosure notices? I saw them in your mailbox. I had mail forwarding set up before I left. All my mail was sent to a secure federal facility. There was no mail in my mailbox. The room was silent except for Jake's frantic paper rustling. Maybe there was some confusion, Mom said hopefully. Maybe Jake misunderstood but was trying to help. The problem, I said carefully, is that Jake forged my signature and illegally sold federal property. Even if his intentions were good, those are serious federal crimes. Jake stood up suddenly. This is insane. It's just a house. A regular house in suburbia. There's nothing federal about it. My security clearance requires registration of my primary residence with federal authorities, I explained. Any unauthorized transaction triggers automatic investigation. Security clearance for what? Dad asked. You said you worked in administrative oversight. I looked at their confused faces. I work in financial crimes investigation, international money laundering, terrorism funding, organized crime networks. My property is monitored as part of national security protocols. Jake sat down hard. You're serious? The buyer's lawyer just called because FBI agents are confiscating all their documents. They spent their life savings on a house they can't legally own because the sale was fraudulent. But I have power of attorney, Jake said weakly. You forged power of attorney. The signature is fake, Jake. We both know you've always been good at copying signatures. My phone buzzed. Fédéral agent en route. 10 minutes. I looked at Jake, who was starting to understand. Jake, federal agents will be here very soon. They're going to arrest you for wire fraud, identity theft, and illegal transfer of federal property. You need to cooperate fully and get a lawyer immediately. Arrest? Mom gasped. But he was trying to help. Mom, Jake forged my signature and illegally sold my house. That he thought he was helping doesn't change the crimes he committed. Jake stared at the documents, probably seeing them clearly for the first time. The forgeries, the fake notices, the identity theft. I didn't mean for this to happen, he whispered. I know, I said gently. But it did happen. You stole a $300,000 asset. That's a federal crime. Car doors slammed outside. Through the window, I saw unmarked black SUVs. Sarah Morrison? A voice called from the door. In here. I called back. 4 FBI agents entered. Agent Martinez nodded at me professionally. Agent Morrison. Is this the subject? I looked at Jake, pale and terrified. This is my brother, Jake Morrison. He's the one who forged the documents and executed the illegal property transfer. Jake Morrison, Agent Martinez announced, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and illegal transfer of federal property. The handcuffs clicked shut. My parents cried, asking if this was necessary. Ma'am, Agent Martinez explained, your son committed multiple federal felonies. This is a national security issue. As they led him away, Jake looked back at me, confused and betrayed. I was trying to help you, he said. I know, I replied. But you committed serious crimes in the process. After they left, I sat with my parents in the suddenly quiet room. The congratulations, Jake banner looked absurd. What happens now? Dad asked. Jake will be processed and charged. He'll need a good lawyer, and will probably face several years in federal prison. The buyers will get their money back. The professionals will face investigation. And I get my house back eventually, after it's processed as evidence. Mom was crying. How did this happen? Jake really thought he was helping you. Jake saw what he wanted to see. He convinced himself I was failing because that fit his image of me. Instead of asking questions, he committed multiple felonies based on assumptions. Over the following weeks, the full scope became clear. He'd created fake default notices by copying letterheads online. He'd practiced my signature for months. He'd researched power of attorney laws to create documents that looked legitimate. The real estate agent and title company were investigated for failing to verify properly. The buyers, David and Michelle Parker, were traumatized but cooperated and received full restitution. Jake was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. At the sentencing, he finally acknowledged the truth. "I convinced myself Sarah was in trouble and I was helping," he told the judge. "But the truth is, I never respected her success. I assumed she was failing because I couldn't accept that my younger sister was more successful than me. My crimes were about maintaining my image as the responsible older brother." The hardest part was the family conversations afterward, when my parents slowly understood their perception of me was completely wrong. I'd been successful, stable, and competent all along. They'd just been unable to see it. "We failed you," Dad said during one difficult talk. "We treated you like you were incapable when you were the most capable person in the family." "You believed what Jake told you," I said. "He's very convincing. But you should have known better. You should have known me better." I moved back into my house 6 months later after it was released from evidence. The security was upgraded, and federal monitoring was more comprehensive. Jake's crime had resulted in enhanced protection. The experience taught me about family dynamics and assumptions. My relatives had been so invested in seeing me as the failure that they accepted an elaborate criminal conspiracy, rather than questioning their beliefs. Jake served his full sentence. We've had limited contact since. He's working as a warehouse employee and living in a supervised halfway house. The federal conviction destroyed his credit, career, and reputation. During his first supervised visit to my house after release, he looked around the living room where he was arrested. "I really thought I was helping you," he said quietly. "I know you did. But Jake, you never once asked me if I needed help. You just assumed I was failing and took action." I couldn't believe my little sister was more successful than me. "That was your problem to solve, not mine to accommodate." He nodded slowly. "I destroyed everything for both of us because I couldn't handle the truth about who you really were." The story became a legend in federal law enforcement. Agent Martinez uses it in training seminars. The case file is titled "The Helpful Brother," a cautionary tale about rationalizing criminal behavior as assistance. But for me, it was a lesson about something deeper. It was about the danger of family members who love you but refuse to see you clearly. Jake's crimes were about his inability to accept that his assumptions were wrong. Sometimes the people who claim to know you best are the ones who refuse to acknowledge who you've actually become. And sometimes protecting yourself requires consequences that feel disproportionate to the emotional crime. Jake learned through federal prison. My parents learned through the shock of his arrest. And I learned through the strange experience of having my competence validated by FBI agents instead of my own family. The house still stands. The buyers found another home and sent a card thanking me. The real estate agent lost her license. The title company implemented new procedures. And Jake learned that assumptions can become criminal acts when they drive you to forge signatures and steal federal property. I still get Christmas cards from Agent Martinez. Last year's read, "Hope your family dynamics are less exciting these days." They are. But it took federal intervention to make that possible. Melissa would rage. She would twist the story, call me selfish, maybe even try to turn the rest of the family against me. I knew that. But I also knew something else. I had proof. I had the law on my side. And most importantly, I had finally reclaimed my voice. This villa wasn't just a house. It was a symbol. A reminder that I had earned my place, my peace, my boundaries, and no one, sister or not, was ever going to take that away from me again. As the last rays of sun slipped beneath the horizon, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope.